Hello everyone, my name is Melissa Kaparkas and this is the presentation on digitization of street art and arising issues. Today is December 5th, 2021. Well, I think one of the things that we should begin with is what is street art? Well, street art is a visual art created in public locations for the public masses. It incorporates the use of outdoors and the streets to communicate a message to those that walk past it daily. This includes those that find meaning in the message and choose to capture it and share it through the digital world. The truth is, to pinpoint where it began can be complicated, but its beginnings shared space with the political and social movements in the 1960s. You see, street art began as slogans of protest and political and social commentary, as graffiti on walls. Essentially, it is the precursor to modern graffiti. And street art and graffiti ultimately continues as one aspect of the genre. Now you see, this can be confusing since street art is intertwined and can be confused with graffiti and public art. According to Carmen Kowick in her paper, Preserving Street Art, Uncovering Changes and Obstacles, which was written in 2015, street art has a message, albeit a political or social one, which graffiti is mostly a form of tagging for territorial purposes. But, as stated before, this has changed as graffiti is incorporated into street art today. Public art, on the other hand, which is on the street and made for the people, is always commissioned by corporate or government institutions. As stated before, street art is shared digitally throughout the world, creating a sort of art without representation, or more so, without a proper historical record. This, along with the ephemeral nature of street art, has led to digitization efforts of street art as a form of preservation. Currently, these efforts are being made by libraries and archives, and as we will see later, for corporations that happen to be for profit. Kowick in 2015 speaks on issues still remaining among archives and special collections. This is when these issues arise when digitizing and trying to preserve street art. Some of the issues that I'm quoting here are accessing the materials, including access restrictions, language barriers, the lack of controlled vocabulary among finding aids, insufficient metadata, and the lack of an online presence. On the other hand, there seems to be an effort to remedy this issue. In the article Street Art in the Library, Transforming Spray Paint into Digital Archive and Virtual Reality Experience, it seems that libraries and archives are beginning to have a better understanding on how the digital preservation of street art can be handled. The 2018 article highlights the University of Nevada, as well as the Reno Libraries and the Digital Media Technology Department, as well as their partnering with an art historian and with local art organizations and Reno street artists to create an online archive. Not only that, but they also created an exhibit and a virtual reality experience, which highlights the explosion of urban street art in Reno. Essentially, this article finds that the correct way of going about digitizing street art is by creating, and I'm quoting here again, a living archive of digital images that is managed by librarians and/or archivists from the community where the art originated, will assure long-term preservation and access. As seen in this article, the first thing to do is have a community-based librarian or an archivist work actively with the actual street art community and create a relationship with street artists to collect information about their art. Now, this may be hard considering that the art is underground and mostly illegal. I should say all of it is illegal, causing artists not to want to share in this endeavor, really. There is the problem of seeing institutions like libraries and archives as being, quote unquote, the man. And as a result, many street artists are suspicious of their ulterior motives. This is why creating a relationship and showing how historically libraries have tried to keep information accessible and free to all is pretty much recommended. In the end, the university saw that having a project manager to handle the moving tasks and an art historian as the conduit between the university and the artist community in Reno as being essential. What happened was that pictures were taken by the art historian with cameras that were actually checked out from the university library, while the project manager gathered and recorded metadata, which, as we all know, is very important. And I'm quoting here that in an attempt to keep the mural's appearance in the archive close to their appearance when being viewed in real life, care was taken not to over-edit the images. And this is important because you see actual footage of people, the street, cars, and other elements. Now, the metadata was created in CatDV, and it was exported into an Excel file and given to the metadata librarian to crosswalk into ContentDM, which is the library's digital asset management system. More importantly, quality control was performed before it went live. The VR team created virtual reality footage using many different software and technologies, thus giving the user the experience of being on the street. The focus overall on the preservation of the street art and not the technology used or the library that helped to create it. The project culminated in the end with an event that celebrated the artists and actually highlighted the archive that was created through this process. And all of this is a way of doing things properly. But as we will see here, things can change and things can actually go wrong. What has happened is in the pursuit of the intention to protect street art, corporations and corporate institutions have come in, such as Google, with their street art project, which launched in 2014. Its agenda, well, is to connect and map street art around the world before it disappears. Obviously, this is a great idea in theory. The issue is that Google creates, and I quote here again, an imposed hierarchy of documentation that prioritizes some artworks over others. Now, this is an erosion of the accuracy of the intellectual infrastructure, which we all know is metadata. I'm also quoting here, Google creates its own tags of objective information for each of their uploaded images, which is not part of a controlled vocabulary. Because of this obviously raises many questions. And this raises many practical concerns with Google Street Art and their digital archival preservation process, which, as you can tell, is really non-existent. It has been seen that sometimes images are not even unhelpfully labeled by participants, but also at times misattributed. Now, the curation and the perspective is set and created by Google. And as a result, it does not follow any set archival standards. Google began this process of taking over cultural heritage with the book, and it's following the same procedures. We've all seen them take over the ebook arena, and other areas such as Amazon have actually taken over as well. What looks like benevolent generosity is really corporate-driven digitization of cultural heritage that comes at a financial cost. One example of this is Google's version of a public good is to transform street art into customizable street art watch faces for its web and Android device market. This essentially is one of the many negative results of technological progress. Besides Google, the current literature includes institutions like airways, libraries, museums, and galleries as also being used to commercialize and privatize their spaces for selling corporate messages and goods. And as we know, this is a shame. Well, at this point, one wonders what can be done, right? Should street art stay ephemeral? Should it be allowed to exist as it was meant to be? Some street artists are taking control and erasing their own artwork as they see practices like preservation and restoration as a way of neutralizing their artwork. They oppose, and I quote, heritization of their work through the adoption of procedures that have been used against them, specifically buffing the painting over of street art, usually carried out by city authorities. What we see here with the artist Blue, he has covered up two of his most famous street murals in Berlin. He called the buffering an act of auto-iconoclasm that not only sought to prevent the further commercial appropriation of the murals by the plot's owners, but also to serve as a statement on the continued gentrification of the city and its zombification. I understand his reasoning, but personally, I think Blue is wrong in a way, because individuals like him and their form of street art, one can say, is the gentrification of graffiti art itself. Either way, Blue, who has himself digitized and preserved his own art making and placed it on social media, in a way has already delved into the heritization of his own work. So in conclusion, yes, street art should remain ephemeral if the artist chooses it to be. And yes, they have the right to erase and ruin it as a social statement. But because of digital technology, street art's digital preservation has in many ways long been assured. In this case, it seems the University of Nevada, along with Reno Libraries, sets a good model of what to do if a community wishes to correctly archive and digitally preserve street art. For the future, it seems like street art will be both a part of the non-for-profit and for-profit world. Ultimately, it will have to be the viewers who educate themselves in knowing where to correctly seek their information. Thank you for listening to this presentation. Here are a list of my references, and if you wish to comment and give your own view on this topic, please feel free to do so. Thank you.